So far we have covered the JDBC template class in considerable detail. We have written a few methods that do both data fetching as well as writing data into the database. And using these methods that we have explored over here, it should be possible to cover all the scenarios that need to be written when it comes to interacting with the database. At least most of the common scenarios should be covered. You can write and you can use any query that updates or deletes data as well as inserts, of course, and you also can execute queries that fetch data from the database. Well, JDBC template is just one of the support classes that's provided by Spring. And the reason why you would want to use something else is because of some of the limitations of the JDBC template. Again, you can do all these operations, but one particular limitation of using the JDBC template is that you can have only these question mark placeholders in your queries. You cannot have named parameters. Now, what are named parameters? Well, named parameters are a way in which you can actually identify these placeholders that you can put inside the query. And the problem with these question mark placeholders is that you will have to move around the parameter locations in case you add additional placeholders. For example, see, I have this query over here which has just one placeholder, one question mark placeholder, and I'm passing one object array with the first element as circle ID. Now let's say there was one other placeholder that needs to be added to the query. As long as the placeholder comes after this question mark, we are fine. We just add additional elements to this object array and it'll work fine. But then if the question mark comes before the placeholder that's already here, then we will have to rearrange the elements in the object array. So the new element will probably come before this element which is already there. So any changes to the query, as long as adding or removing these placeholders are concerned, will result in a change in the order in which you supply the values for these placeholders, which is a pain if you're dealing with a particularly long query. So the advantage of using named placeholders is that you can assign names for these placeholders, and then you can say, when you're substituting the parameters, you can say, hey, put this value for this variable name, and then it just goes to the right position irrespective of the order wherever the the placeholder is in the query. So this kind of a name placeholder is not possible to write using the JDBC template. JDBC template accepts only these kind of a question mark placeholders. So in order to address that, there is one other class which supports named placeholders, and that's called named parameter JDBC template. So let's open that in the Spring, and in the JDBC jar, go to this particular package, JDBC core named param. So this named param has some support classes for addressing this named parameter. So here you see a named parameter JDBC template. So this is the class that we will use, and we will use this in place of the existing JDBC template. And in fact, the named parameter JDBC template that you're seeing over here actually uses this core class, the JDBC template, and then adds this named parameter functionality on top of it. So all the methods that you've seen over here, the JDBC template methods, all that we've learned so far still applies, but then one additional functionality we can do is use named parameters instead of these question mark parameters. So let's have a look at that. I'll create a new method over here. See, you have the insert circle over here, so I'll just in fact, let me just comment this out. We will try to rewrite this using named parameter. So I'll just copy the first two lines of code over here. Okay, and now here, instead of having these question marks, I will use named parameters. And the way I use named parameters is by using a colon and then the variable name. So I'll call this ID, and this parameter I'll call this colon name. So you can have as many parameters as you want. Just start the variable name with a colon and then give the name to the parameter. Okay, so now I will have to use the name parameter template over here, and I do that by declaring the name parameter over here. Just like I have a JDBC template declaration, I will also declare a name parameter template. I've called this the name parameter JDBC template, and I will import this from the same package that we have seen. Okay, now that I've done this, I will also have to initialize this just like I've done for the JDBC template. And normally you wouldn't be doing both of them in the same class. You know, it would either be the JDBC template or the name parameter template. Just because I'm demonstrating the functionality, this code will have both. So it'll be same as what I have over here, it'll just be a different template that's getting initialized. So in this particular DAO class, I happen to have two JDBC templates. So as you can see, the initialization is exactly the same. It's just a different class, different name, but then everything else is exactly the same. Now, the way in which I use that name parameter to run a circle, a query which has name parameters is slightly different. So what I do here is I use a particular class called SQL parameter source. A SQL parameter source is an interface for an object that I can use to pass these parameter sources as a map. Let me write that and it'll probably be a bit more clearer. Parameter source. Now a SQL parameter source, I'll call this named parameters. So this is something that I'm going to prepare to substitute these values. So this will have, the name parameters will have a value for ID and a value for name, and then I will pass this name parameter to the name parameter JDBC template. So I will create a new, I cannot create a new SQL parameter source because it's an interface. I can create one of the implementations of the SQL parameter source, one of them being map. So a map SQL parameter source is an implementation of the SQL parameter source, and this will store these values as maps. Again, a SQL parameter source is the source of values for my named parameter placeholders, and then I will have to supply a SQL parameter source when I'm running the query. And the way I supply a SQL parameter source is by creating an instance of the SQL parameter source. Since this happens to be an interface, I cannot say new SQL parameter source. I will have to create one of the implementations of that interface, one of them being map, which provides these values as a map. So I will initialize this. I will say ID is the variable, and then I will pass the ID circle dot get ID. Of course, I'll have to import both these classes. So now this will initialize a map SQL parameter source, and it will assign it to a name parameter. So this would work fine if it was just one placeholder value. Say I had only ID over here, just like I have for all the other queries. It's just one placeholder. So for this would work fine. It has the ID placeholder name and then the value assigned to it. So it's a single value map, and this would work fine. I have initialized name parameters, but in this query I have two name placeholders. I have another placeholder called name itself. So I need to add this to the map SQL parameter source. So I will do that by doing a dot add value, and then this has a signature of, again, param name and value. So I will use name and then the value being circle dot get name. Okay, so now I have a initialized named parameters as the SQL parameter source. So this needs to be passed to my name parameter JDBC template. So let's do that now. So I will say named parameter JDBC template dot, I will use the same method over here, the method that I've used, which is an update. So I will use the update, and here you can see there is this particular signature which takes in SQL as the first parameter and then the SQL parameter source as the second parameter. So we have both of them. SQL is the one that we prepared over here, and then the SQL parameter source is the one that I prepared over here. So let's use this. So the first parameter being the string SQL, the second parameter being the named parameters. And this should do. So now I am passing both the query as well as the parameter substitution to the named parameter JDBC template. This should do the execution. It actually does the same functionality as what we have seen over here, the JDBC template dot update. But then here we are using name parameters instead. That's the only thing that's different. So now let's save and run this to make sure it does this fine. So I will again comment this out and then uncomment this. So I will create a new row here. I'll call it 4. Fourth circle, and then I'm getting the size here. Before you run, make sure that your database is running. And here it is. My database is running in network server mode, so we are all set. Let's execute this. There you see the count has become 4. So we will run one more insert and make sure that is getting inserted as well. Now the count should be 5. And it is 5. So this is another way in which we can run queries. Again, this is a limitation of the JDBC template that we've been seeing so far. It can accept only these question mark placeholders. It cannot accept named placeholders like we have done over here. So if you need to use something like this, you will have to use the named parameter JDBC template. And then of course you need to supply the named parameter values with this particular interface, the SQL parameter source. You can use one of the implementations, which is the map SQL parameter source, which allow us to add all these values using a map implementation. And then once you've done this, all you need to do is pass the SQL as well as this named parameter map to the same methods. Whatever we've seen so far, we can use the same corresponding methods of the named parameter JDBC template. Now there is one other template class that I would like to briefly cover in this tutorial. Well, I'd just like to mention it, in fact, because this is something that uses a lot of the things that we have discussed so far in both the JDBC template as well as the named parameter JDBC template. Now let's say you want to use a JDBC template that allows us to do both the question mark parameter substitution as well as the name parameter substitution. In that case, it's actually a bad idea to have both these templates lying around in your DAO class. This is not a good idea. You should have just one JDBC template. So in order to do that, in order to have the option of using both these types of placeholders, you use something called as simple JDBC template. Now the simple JDBC template is a new addition, and it uses some of the Java 5 features that have been also newly introduced to Spring. So you can, it has options for some methods implementing var args and autoboxing and things like that. So in order to use that, all you need to do is, instead of using either the JDBC template or the named parameter JDBC template, you use simple JDBC template. And now I can import this. Now this is from JDBC core simple. Now this does not have all the methods that you've that's available in the JDBC template or the name parameter JDBC template. This is kind of like it brings in more commonly used methods and features of both these templates, and it's very likely that this should suffice for most of the database interactions that we would write. So I would encourage you to explore this class and use that as much as possible.